Welcome to Teaching Orchestra. In this video, I'm going to be giving my thoughts on how to address style and sharing some of my teaching concepts. As Ian Edlund points out here in the program notes, the intent is to get your students to play off the string on some of this. Like in this spot before rehearsal A, for instance, we have two basic off-the-string bowing concepts here, the quarter note brush and the eighth note spiccato. In Season 1, Episode 7, I go over a lot of the general process on how I approach the brush and spiccato strokes and off-the-string technique in general. And I go into quite a bit of detail, and probably too much detail for this video and maybe too much detail for that video too. But the key takeaway should be that we start both of these bow strokes on the string. We always start with the bow on the string. That's the fundamental of string playing. Make sure your students set the bow, but it's not enough just to preach the word of Dr. Rabin to your students. We got to practice it. That's why here in my teaching companion, available on teachingorchestra.com, the brush exercise reinforces that. You want to get your students to play from the string, not to the string, and they need to learn the difference. If this is their introduction to brushstrokes, they may not be able to play them at tempo. You may need to slow it down until they get a feel for it, and once they do, then you can try speeding it up. If they can't play a brushstroke correctly, the chances of them playing spiccato are pretty low. That's why in the teaching companion, we address the brushstroke first, then we get them to bounce. There's a range of tempo where spiccato works well, and if you go too slow, it gets trickier. So when you start to add the left hand and work in the left hand patterns, a useful trick is to double up on the notes rather than reducing the speed of the metronome. If it's still too fast with 2 bows, play 4 bows. Okay, if that's too fast, play 8 bows. Do whatever you need to. But when you slow it down too much and you have to change your technique, and then you speed it back up, you're going to run into problems. So let's just take a look at how I address this in the teaching companion. The first thing that I do when I look at a left-hand pattern, and we'll just look at left-hand pattern 3, we take the pattern and we double up on the notes. You can triple up, quadruple up, whatever it takes. Triple up might be awkward. Quadruple up, add 8 bows, whatever it takes so that you learn the style so that you don't have to reduce the speed with the metronome. Okay, back here we also have the tenuto style. Now for the tenuto style, you can learn it slowly and quickly. It's not as important as the off-the-string stuff. But whichever style you're playing in, bow placement really matters. And I like to standardize this before I even pass the parts out to them. So I'll give them the teaching companion and I'll just have them go through the rhythms. I'll have them standardize that these tenuto quarter notes are at the balance point, and that'll give me the most success. It'll standardize my style, and it'll help with rhythm. I also go through all of these tenuto rhythms one by one on an open D, and I make sure that they're comfortable with the technique before they ever even see the music. Where do we play tenuto quarter notes? At the balance point. Where do we start this down bow? At the balance point. Okay, where do we lift and reset to after this rest? At the balance point. Okay, look at this part. We don't rest. We just have 4 quarter notes after. Where do we need to get back to when we do it again? Oh, that's right, the balance point. I do this in the teaching companion because it models what I do in class. Open strings first. Get it right before we add the left hand. I think this falls into the spirit of what Ian Edlund wants when he says that bow division concepts can be effectively taught with this piece. Bow placement really matters. It's going to affect your style, and if it's not uniform, if it's unconventional, it's not going to go well. I've worked with some great orchestra teachers that come from different backgrounds, and one of the things that isn't as intuitive for non-string players is uniform bow placement and what sort of effect that has on people's playing. I was watching a clinician work with a group not too long ago, and the clinician asked the orchestra to start from the middle of the bow to play 8th notes. At the break, one of the teachers, who doesn't have a background in strings, said, "Wow, I've never heard of that before." Yeah, Uniform bow placement, what a concept, right? And I'm not telling the story to trash somebody or, to point out somebody's ignorance. I'm using it to illustrate a point of how important it is to create an awareness so that your rehearsals go better. Another thing that a lot of people don't realize is that uniform bow placement will affect your rhythm. And that's something that also isn't particularly intuitive for a non-string player. If a student runs out of bow, they rush. If a student bounces too close to the frog, they rush. So there's some amazing folks out there that are incredible on their instruments, but they don't have a background in strings. And for them, it's kind of a novel concept to approach rhythm from a bow placement point of view rather than a sit down with a metronome point of view. We focus on the mechanics. And if we don't know that, it can be frustrating to our students if we're saying, hey, stay with the metronome. Hey, stay with the metronome. We try to beat it into them. But there's a lot going on there with the mechanics, and if we don't address that, we're going to have issues. Even some of my colleagues that play string instruments mess this up, and I'm not saying this again to trash people. I'm just trying to create an awareness. If your head's in the score and you're not looking up at your kids, who knows where they're playing? So that's my sales pitch on bow placement. I think it's mission critical. You should try it. And in my next video, I'm going to go over the left-hand patterns and give you my advice on how to make your inner voices sound really clear. Check it out, and I'll see you next time.